Just like last season, Deandre Ayton stepping up at the perfect time for the Phoenix Suns. Why his play has been so important, what it means for the Suns this postseason and beyond, coming up on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a contributor at Suns.com, as well as Dime Magazine, and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. We are everywhere, YouTube and every podcast platform. Keep us that way by listening and following along like you are already doing, and telling every Suns fan in your life to do the same. Deandre Ayton is the topic of conversation across Sunsland, it seems, this week, coming off of 3 incredibly strong performances. I want to talk about why this streak from him has been more of the same, and get into what it could mean down the line. We'll also get to some Lakers talk at the end. I'll close with some laughter at the Lakers' expense, which is always something we can get behind. But Deandre Ayton last year, almost at this same exact time, because of the way that the schedules were a little bit different, really hit his stride around the beginning of April of last year, really, but even a bit earlier than that. Starting, not coincidentally, against the Lakers. March 21st, 2021, Deandre Ayton scores 26 points against the Los Angeles Lakers in what would become a 17-point blowout win over the Suns' eventual first-round opponent. From that point on, he is basically playoff DA from start to finish. Now, he if you remember, quieted down a considerable amount as April flipped to May and so on and so forth at the very end of the season. But from that 26-point performance on March 21st of last year, he has a 27-point night in a win against Houston, which everybody should remember. That was one of his best games of the entire season. Just demolishes Christian Wood, has a game-winning bucket against him. I believe had a block on Wood late in that game as well. DA again against a small ball team, the Sacramento Kings, April 15th, a win at home. DA, 26 points, 11 rebounds. The Kings go small with Harrison Barnes at center, and that was really all that she wrote in that regard, and that was off to the races for Deandre Ayton, to just give you 2 cliches back-to-back there about DA. But Ayton's performance from that point on, he was the guy. He was the guy we came to know, the guy who wins Game 3 of the conference finals single-handedly, basically, with the 2020 game in Los Angeles. He is the guy who is able to guard Nikola Jokic in the post and score on the other side. He's the guy who controls games with his energy against the Lakers in the first round. Like, that is the DA that we came to know, and we saw him come, that performance, that game of his come together around this point in the regular season. I say all that to say that we are, I believe, seeing a very similar stretch play out right now. And you could see it in the numbers since the All-Star break. He starts out a little bit quiet, 6 points, but basically from the Sunday game against the Utah Jazz, a loss, of course, if you remember, on, he has been incredible. 23 points in that game to go along with 3 offensive rebounds. He has an 18-8 game in the 30-point blowout over Portland, a 30-point game in the win over the Bucks, and then the past 2, especially with the rebounding kicking back into high gear, 21-19 against Orlando and their huge front line, and then 19-10. A very, very important 19-10. I think he was maybe the single most important player in the win over the Heat on Wednesday night. even though his stat line seems fairly normal. Double, big man. Okay, you're 7 feet tall, 19 and 10 is what you should be doing. It's pretty much what you've averaged your whole career. We're not going to throw you a parade. And I hear that, but that game might have been the crowning achievement of all of them. And he only did it in 29 minutes and 50 seconds. We are seeing the leveling up of Deandre Ayton before our eyes. It's happening at the right time, and it's happening just in the nick of time, I would say, as well, because you really needed to check that box. I would even say that might be the final component of this Suns team that needed to come together. And so to see it happen with DA doing that, and as Aaron Edwards, my weekly guest here on the show, mentioned yesterday when we recapped that Heat game, to see Ayton doing this without campaign might be the most impressive part of all of it, because I just went through it. We've seen this before. We've even seen it in the postseason before. But what we haven't seen is with Chris Paul out, for Ayton to be able to step up and perform at this level, score, stay engaged, stay aggressive without Paul in his ear and without Paul feeding him passes. Like, that's a whole extra layer to this. I also wanted to go through the shot chart that DA has put together this season. I won't throw it up on YouTube because it's not exactly the most digestible visual there, but Sam Cooper of the Timeline podcast tweeted this out today, and it was DA's shot chart since the All-Star break. The bottom line is it's green everywhere. He has not taken any corner threes, but aside from that, he is actually, no, this is for the entire season. But aside from that, he is green, which means at least 10% field goal percentage above league average at every single spot on the floor. At the rim, 75.2% from the long paint to area, sort of that free throw line area. He is 61.7%. 45.7% on long mid-range shots, and then, only a few threes, but he is at 39% there. So every single spot that you get him the ball, he has been not only good, but also much improved from last year. It's incredible. It is really, really good stuff. He's also taking 41% of his shots from the free throw line. So not only is, from the rim, which is also an elite mark, to get those shots and to convert at that level. It's a big part of why you hear people ask all the time, how is Deandre Ayton so effective when he doesn't necessarily have that one special skill? It's like, well, if you can control the rim defensively, which Ayton does a pretty good job of, and if you can create high volume and efficient shots for yourself and for your team, which are normally going to end in him taking them, then that's going to be a great way to have an impact on basketball games. And so that's really what Ayton has been able to do lately, with the rebounding uptick, with the scoring uptick, with the aggressiveness. And again, to do it without Chris Paul makes you feel incredible. So I want to talk about what it sort of means big picture, because we know how much is lying on Deandre Ayton, resting on his shoulders this season, not only to help this team win, but also to create a future for himself contract-wise. So we'll get to that aspect of all of this. But first, guys, it's that time of year again, and college basketball's tournaments are finally upon us. From all the latest odds contests and player props to who might be going home champion, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for scores, podcasts, and news this season. That's right. They've upped their game. They have content available as well to inform your betting. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all sports wagering info, including live betting, season odds, props, and even your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Want to read you guys a quote that Deandre Ayton had actually post-game on NBA TV after the Heat game, is what I'm assuming. This is from Matt Peterson, who worked for the Suns at one point, now works for the NBA. I don't know why DA was giving an interview on NBA TV, considering the Suns game against the Heat last night was actually on ESPN, but here is the quote nevertheless. It might have been on Tuesday. At the end of the day, it's how big are your goals. He was asked directly about not getting the extension based on how well he's been playing. So that's the context. Here's what he said. At the end of the day, it's how big are your goals. I want to be established as a winner in this league. Just looking for an extension is not it. This thing is bigger than that. He goes on to say, winning games can get you to that, as in getting paid. Just having the teammates around me to keep me level-headed and to not get too high, not get too low. It's hard to turn your back on these dudes and even come in the gym and pout. So when I read that, and Matt Peterson on Twitter actually linked to the video as well, and you can hear him say it, it backs up everything that I think we all expected from him when he didn't get that deal last fall. My initial podcast, I can remember exactly what my take was at the time, which is Deandre Ayton will still get paid. He knows that. He is an externally motivated person who will derive motivation from the missing out on the contract that he just suffered through. And I believe this locker room is strong enough to withstand it because I think the players have always been on DA's side. I think Chris Paul saying we're going to get DA his bag. I think Mikhail saying throughout that he hoped both he and DA would get their contracts. I don't think the player part of this has ever been a problem. So those were my thoughts then, and this quote completely just backs that up. It's him knowing that winning and continuing to compete at a high level and execute what's being asked of him within this group is his best way to impact the game and to get that contract and to get the respect around the league. And I think he also knows that turning this into a big pout fest and putting the attention on himself it's antithetical to the way that this Suns culture operates. And despite however frustrated he might be because of all of that, I don't really feel like there was ever a part of him that wanted to take away from the Suns' success or the attention on the rest of his teammates and make it about himself. He's not that type of guy. He has, from day one, you can say whatever you want about him, and I've had plenty of criticism of him over the years. Ayton has always been a guy who wants to buy in, who wants to fit into something, be part of something bigger, and win. I mean, that's true. It's been the case since he found a kindred spirit in Mark Bryant and Monty Williams. It's been the case since Chris Paul got here and demanded a higher level of accountability and performance out of Ayton. Like, he has stepped up to the cultural challenges that this team has presented him every single step of the way. So you can't take that from him at all. Doesn't surprise me to hear this. And of course, this stretch is a big part of the case that he can make to James Jones or whichever general manager he goes and gets that offer sheet from, that, hey, I am this type of guy. Yeah, I could do to be more consistent, maybe, right? I could probably round out my game a little bit more. There's some things that I do sometimes that I should probably do all of the time. But at the end of the day, you know that when you need to count on me, when you need me, you can count on me to perform at a high level, to be the best on the biggest stage, and to fit into, in an elite way, whatever it is that my team needs out of me. And I think that, honestly, to me, like, that is the argument for Ayton from a contract perspective. It's always been the argument. It's the fact that he could have had better stats. He could have done this or that. He could have had a 30-30 game at some point in his career. Maybe we want him to be David Robinson, whatever it might be. But the case for Ayton to win, to earn the money, to get the contract, it was always two things. It was execution of his role, which is basically all an NBA player can do. Yeah, of course, there's cases where guys take on the extra responsibility in certain moments. They earn more of it, and suddenly that role has doubled in size, and it's because of the work they put in. Yes, of course that happens. But for the most part, all you can ask of an NBA player is to do what they can do at the highest level that fits alongside the other four guys on the floor. Ayton has done that. The other part that this contract negotiation, this debate about it, was market value. And not so much market value among centers, because if you look at it that way, then yes, Ayton probably should be more in the Jared Allen category, or I don't know, fill in whoever you want, Brooke Lopez, whatever example you want to use. That's probably where Ayton was. It's not that market value, though. It's market value for the other players in his age group and in his draft class who have been paid above and beyond what they've performed at in their NBA careers. And the fact that you see guys like Michael Porter Jr. and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who have not really been drivers of winning basketball during their careers, getting significant max contracts. Ayton, at that point, it's very difficult to turn around and say that Ayton, who is doing everything being asked of him by this Suns team, does not deserve to be paid by the Suns team. So I guess I still will obviously admit that when I see national media voices who aren't as plugged into this team, or even fans who are frustrated with Ayton, say that he hasn't earned that contract, I hear it. I get it. I would understand. I mean, in a vacuum, I probably would agree. But I think what he's showing us as a reminder during this stretch, and the mentality that he's flashing in that interview, both to me go to speak to the reality that Ayton needs to and will get that max contract. I just still don't see a way around it. I think that's how this ends, and I think that he deserves it at the end of the day. And this week, again, has been a massive reminder of why. I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. I think he's going to continue to step up while Paul is out, while they head toward a record of wins for the franchise, which I misspoke the other day and said it was 64. It is definitely 62. Appreciate all of you commenting on YouTube to let me know that I missed that. They are very, very close. That matters. All of this stuff matters. DA knows that, and he knows that production and winning will be the best ways to get that contract. So just to check in on that, I promised you guys when he didn't sign that deal that I would not be talking about it week to week, month to month even. So this performance lately needed to be addressed, and there you go. Another thing that needs to be addressed is the lack of high-level performance by the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll have some fun at their expense, and I'll also remind you guys of one missed part of the Lakers saga that I think directly intersects with the Phoenix Suns. We'll get to that in just a second. First, though, guys, today's show also brought to you by Built Bar, the best-tasting protein bar on the planet and my favorite protein bar. We know as winter turns to spring here that it's difficult to keep on your goals for 2022. Maybe you told yourself you'd go to the gym and you already lost your card. Maybe you told yourself you'd eat better and you're already back to the candy bars. Well, Built Bar, that is where they come in. They make it easy to eat right, to power yourself up, to fuel yourself, whether it's for a workout or just to get through the day, because they are delicious. They make it easy. Built Bar worries about the taste first, then they figure out how to make it healthy, and they pulled it off every single time that they've tried. Every single Built Bar covered in 100% chocolate, making it very soft, very easy to chew, very delectable. And then they have crammed it with flavors upon flavors, something for everybody. Strawberry and orange, or maybe you're a mint chocolate, mint brownie is actually what it's called, or maybe you're a coconut type. I don't know. And of course, there are Built Bar Puffs, the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, which is packed with the same 15 to 20 grams of protein that a normal Built Bar is, less than 5 grams of sugar, no more than 150 calories. You know what you're getting in a Built Bar. You know it's going to be delicious, and you know it's going to be good for you. Find your own. Find your favorite. Discover something new. Go to Built.com, guys. Use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Alrighty, let's go ahead and laugh at the Lakers. That is what we're going to do to close out today's show. And look, it's been very en vogue lately around the NBA to joke about the Lakers. They are not making it difficult by any means. They lost to the Rockets in overtime. Most recently, I believe they've dropped 7 of 8 or 8 of 9. They are firmly entrenched in the back half of the standings. Currently, they would have to play 2 play-in games to even make the playoffs. They would have to play the Pelicans or the Blazers, we don't know, and then they would have to play the winner of the Timberwolves and the Clippers just to make the 8th seed and have a chance to play the Suns one more time in the postseason. So they are not covering themselves in any sort of glory right now. But what I think has been missed are two things that link this Lakers team to this Suns team. One is obvious, but actually doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. It's Monty Williams. Everybody remembers that Monty was the frontrunner to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. It was him or it was Tyronn Lue. Lue went to the Clippers. I don't know. There was some disrespect stuff at that time as to whether Lue was going to be offered the length of contract that he wanted. I don't know if it was so much pay, but I definitely remember length was an issue because it seemed that the Lakers wanted to offer Ty Lue the contract that would link his length of tenure directly to the length of time that LeBron had left on his deal. And I think there was some uh, rubbed the wrong way sort of feelings from Lou that he was being looked at as just a LeBron whisperer, basically, and not a very, very high level NBA coach, which he has been basically since the day that he went to the Clippers. Actually, I have that wrong because that was not the season he went to the Clippers. That was when he was between jobs after he had left the Cleveland Cavaliers. Once Lou did not get signed and choose the Lakers and actually chose to, I believe, just stay unemployed and wait things out, and then eventually becomes an assistant with the Clippers and then replaces Doc Rivers. Monty Williams comes into play at that point for the Lakers. They interview him. They were, according to Adrian Wojnarowski at the time, quote, planning to target him and planning a second interview before all of a sudden the Suns swoop in. Monty chooses the Suns after, I believe, one or maybe two, but I believe it may have just been one in-person interview with James Jones and Robert Sarver in Philadelphia during Monty's time coaching the Sixers in the playoffs back in 2019. And Monty chooses the Suns, of course, and the rest is history. He comes to the Suns, rejuvenates the franchise instantly with Ricky Rubio, and now we're here. But what I think is lost, forgotten, overlooked about that decision is that Monty Williams, more than anybody else, at least in that search, in my opinion, I think prized culture. And so I think Monty saw from a mile away how difficult, intense things are going to be. Not only the level of scrutiny and expectation that the Lakers have, I don't think Monty would be one to shy away from that. But what we are seeing is the wreckage that follows LeBron James as he gets more desperate and dire toward winning a championship. LeBron lost in the first round last year, dealt with injuries, watched as Anthony Davis dealt with injuries, and decided to overhaul his entire team and try again with veterans like he always does. And I think we are but we're watching again in slow motion in real time here as LeBron deals with the teardown that he inspired for the Lakers with Russell Westbrook coming in and nearly everything they had going out. And I think Monty deserves a lot of credit for seeing that coming and deciding that this upstart young Suns team with Ayton, Booker, and Bridges was somehow more desirable. And there's more reporting at that point that from Woj and others that the Lakers were completely shocked when Monty took that job. And Monty has said that he was never officially offered a job by the Lakers, and so he doesn't agree with the narrative that is formed. But nevertheless, he clearly saw it. He was right, and it's a big distinction. And I think the NBA is going to continue to fracture in this way. You're going to be a team that chases the stars as they move around constantly every year, and you have James Harden changing teams into every season over the course of 2 years. You have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard just spearheading a complete overhaul of the Clippers and on down the list. As all of that happens, you're going to be a team that does that, or you're going to be a team that does not do that. And the Suns, of course, traded for Chris Paul. I think the circumstances, we all can agree, were pretty different. And so Monty choosing the team who wasn't building that way is really fascinating. And I think the Suns have been proven correct. I'm not going to say that just because they've played better than the Lakers over the past 2 seasons just means that Monty chose correctly and we all should have known and the Lakers suck and whatever. I don't think it's that, but I think these two franchises, just kind of comparing them up against one another, is super fascinating because the Suns choosing not to build that way I think is entirely what makes them feel so sustainable. And even looking past Chris Paul, you feel like, as we're seeing right now, while Chris recovers from the fracture in his right thumb, that Williams and this group can survive because they've built a deep team, a young team, a cohesive team. And so, it's not just Monty, but it's also this new era of team building where you get a star, you extend a star, and then you wait until you have to either trade that same star or find another one to add to your mix, and then you shuffle the deck again in 5 years. That's where we're headed. That's what team building is at the very highest levels in the NBA right now. And then on the other hand, you have teams like the Suns or the Grizzlies or the Bucks who have built the old-fashioned way, the organic way, added pieces to their young stars, and found a way to win anyway. And so that sort of polarization that's happening in the NBA, I think, is just completely epitomized by the Lakers and the Suns, and the fact that they played last year only makes it more fascinating. The fact that they're rivals makes it more fascinating. And then, of course, you have Monty Williams, who was right there in the middle of all of it, chose the more surprising route, and has reaped the benefits completely. So very, very interesting sort of fork in the road moment. I don't think people talk about Monty spurning the Lakers, Ty Lue even spurning the Lakers when they talk about whatever's going on with the coaching and the leadership and everything else, the culture over there. I don't know if a head coach could have changed much, but I do know that Monty has made a big impact here and definitely seems to have been proven right. You can watch Winning Time on HBO, I guess, to get filled in on the rest of the craziness around the Lakers. I've loved watching that show. We may need to cast. This sounds like a show I should do with Aaron. We may need to cast the Lakers, the Suns version of that Winning Time show. It would definitely be called 7 Seconds or Less. I could definitely see an HBO show about that group. The Colangelos, D'Antoni, Stoudemire, into Shaq, like very much not as like disco and cultural as a moment as the Showtime Lakers, but I could definitely see it. We'll have to see if we can put that together. But that'll do it for today, guys. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. It's been a fun week here on the show. I'll have recaps. I'll be at the Raptors and Lakers games this weekend, so I will have recaps. A recap of both of those games on Sunday night, ready for you guys right after the buzzer of that Lakers game. So be on the lookout there. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything you might have missed around the association on Thursday night.